Hello my friends and welcome to the Simple Sober Life. I am Joshua and I help others make simple changes to create a life of awesome. Welcome my friends and thank you so much for joining me. So I don't know if you've noticed or not, it would be really hard to believe that you haven't, but we are in the midst of huge changes here in the United States and around the world. You know, with the onset of this virus, so many changes have been inflicted upon our lives. Many of us can't leave the house anymore under social distancing restrictions. Financial markets are collapsing. People are becoming unemployed. There's food shortages and necessary product shortages in the store. The way that we used to interact with people has completely changed. And one of the things that we need to do as a people is learn how to cope with these changes. I believe that the only thing constant in life is change. Now, generally it doesn't happen this rapidly and with such a huge impact. But if we can learn some basic coping skills on how to deal with these changes that are going on, then I think we will lower some of our anxiety, lower some of our depression, and create an overall better environment for ourselves and for everyone else around us. And the thing is, nothing will ever be the same after this. From what is happening right now, we are all learning valuable lessons about how we need to move forward in the future. And if we're able to deal with that now, if we're able to cope with those changes now, then we'll be better advanced to be able to cope with even more changes in upcoming months and years and decades. So one of the methods that we can use to actually cope with the changes that are happening right now and with changes in general is actually don't expect consistency. And I think if there's any lesson that we have learned from what is happening in the world right now is that nothing is consistent. And unfortunately, since this whole thing started, we have been getting inundated with different news reports saying this and people around work saying that. And everything is so inconsistent that we just don't know what to believe anymore. But here's the thing, if we actually go into life expecting the unexpected and expecting there to be so much instability, then we will actually be better off for it. People who were working just a few weeks ago are no longer at work. They're no longer bringing in any sort of income. And, people who are generally healthy are now, kind of fighting for their lives. And so there's absolutely no stability in life. And so if we, in going into this and things in the future, with that understanding, it will better help us. There was actually a research study done, and the principle of the study was the consequences of how people reacted to being unstable. And this research happened back in the 70s in Chicago. A famous researcher followed a bunch of employees from the telephone company. And when the telephone companies were destabilized, this particular company had to go through a multitude of changes. And it found two distinct groups. It found very active and adaptive leaders. And then it also found, people who were really struggling with the changes that were going on. And the distinct difference between the two groups as to why they fell into one or the other categories was the way that they reacted to the changes. The adaptive leaders actually looked at the changes, and whether they wanted them or not, looked at it as an opportunity to fix other problems within the company and fix other problems within their lives. They were able to, embrace these changes, again, whether they wanted them or not, and actually use them to their advantage. As to where with the other group, they solely focused on how bad things were and how negatively these changes were affecting their lives. And we're seeing this very much so in the midst of, this pandemic that we're in the middle of. We're seeing very distinctive groups. People who are, who are wallowing in fear and who, are just scared for their lives, and other ones who are taking initiative and they're actually creating active measures to help benefit the rest of society. And so the way that we react to these changes has a huge impact in how we actually cope with them and handle changes in the future. So I encourage you to be one of those adaptive leaders. Find ways that you're able to help people around you and actually build people up rather than, spreading fear and, inaccurate stories around, the workplace or your social groups, although we're not, in social groups anymore, but however you're communicating with people, stop spreading those inaccurate stories, things that have no basis in fact, because all that's doing is spreading more fear and creating a more difficult environment in adapting to these changes and coping with these changes. Another thing that we can do is, actually focus on solutions rather than the problem. At work, I'll go in and there are a couple of guys in there who are so problem driven. The only thing that they want to talk about is, how this is negatively affecting everyone. And, our hours at work were just cut because of this. I'm very fortunate enough to actually be able to go to a job still, but our hours were cut, and so that will be a significant reduction in pay for everyone across the board. And they're talking about how not really serious this epidemic is, this pandemic is, and they're talking about how it's so overblown and how it. And to be completely honest, I was right there with them a couple of weeks ago until I actually got the facts and started doing research and talking to people who knew what was happening with the problem, that I got some factual information. But in response to that, focusing on the solution, what are we going to do? We're going to start washing our hands a lot more. Every time we use the restroom, before we eat, after touching doorknobs. I know we're not supposed to be touching our faces, as almost impossible as that is. Wearing masks and whenever necessary, whenever going out, when we have to go out in public. Taking the necessary steps and creating actions to come up with a solution can help us cope with the stress of uncertain times and dealing with change. If we're more action focused, if we're more solution based, that actually creates a positive aspiration in our heads, so we're not drowning in self-pity and we're not drowning in depression and anxiety and fear. Creating an action plan and actually walking towards steps to come up with a viable solution will help mitigate some of those fears and uncertainties. Another thing that we can do is focus on our values rather than the fear. Undoubtedly, people are scared, and they have every right to be. I mean, this is something that we have never seen before in our life, something that has spread globally and has literally affected every person on the planet. We've never seen that. And something as uncertain as that, and something that is so mystifying, is bound to cause some fear. But if we focus on that fear, then the only thing that we're going to do is be perpetuating these negative feelings, and we're going to have those snowball. However, if we focus on the values that we obtain, you know, the values of friends and family, spirituality, and things like that, we'll be better equipped to deal and cope with these uncertain changes that are happening. And that takes into account, you know, going to the grocery store. I just went to the grocery store yesterday, and there are select pieces of meat here and there. There's still no toilet tissue. There's still no sanitation, cleaning products or anything like that. So let me ask you, under normal circumstances, and I know this isn't normal, but would you go in and stockpile on toilet paper, on chicken, on Clorox, on, you know, all these different products? Would you do that under normal circumstances? Probably not, because you, A, don't need it all, and B, you're taking other people into consideration. And so if we start working more on our core values, you know, actually taking other people into consideration, we will cope better with these uncertain changes and, you know, actually help others in the process. And lastly, and my favorite one, is actually focusing on the positivity. Now, we are over inundated every single day with, you know, death toll rising. You know, the people who have tested positive, those numbers are rising. Unemployment is rising. Financial markets are lowering. You know, we're under a constant barrage, and it doesn't matter where you look, whether it be social media, traditional media, newspaper, anywhere you look, that's all that's on the news. And this negativity, this constant negativity, can do nothing to your psyche but diminish your value, your self-worth, and increase your depression and your anxiety. It's no wonder that, you know, people are, you know, starting to relapse in this time. It's no wonder that alcoholism is starting to spike and drug abuse is starting to spike. These are uncertain times, and anxiety is just rising up within us, and we need to take a break. We've got to step back and, you know, look at some positive stories to help kind of clear the mind, give us some hope, know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And, you know, I saw online a story about a little girl, a little 6-year-old girl who loves being with her grandparents, and unfortunately, due to the social restrictions, she's not able to go visit them right now. And so her and her 70-odd-year-old grandfather had a dance party in the middle of the street. They kept their distance, but they were able to engage, and, you know, they were able to interact with each other and, you know, have that human bond, even though they, you know, weren't close together. You know, human interest pieces like that can really help a lot in dealing with these uncertain changes and dealing with anxiety and depression. One of my favorite actors, John Krasinski, just started a YouTube channel called Some Good News. And, you know, it's brilliant. It's already got, I think, a couple million subscribers to it. But, you know, these are the positive stories that we need to, you know, take time to look at and take time to actually, you know, kind of wash all the negativity off of us. This will help tremendously in coping with those feelings of uncertainty, feelings of anxiety and depression. You know, we've got to get some sort of positivity in our lives, because we'll be overrun with all of that negative aspect, those negative stories. We'll be completely overrun. It's exhausting. It's tiring, mentally and physically. And so we kind of need a reprieve from that. And so I hope you got value out of this. If you did, please make sure to comment down below. What other coping strategies do you use in order when we have times of uncertainty, times of big change. What do you do to help cope with that so that you can come out awesome on the other side? My name's Joshua. This is The Simple Sober Life, and if you like this video, please give it a big old thumbs up and subscribe. Hit that bell when you subscribe so you get notified each time I create a video. And until next time, my friends, cheers.